Hello and welcome back to the LFC transfer room. Today I'm joined by Dom Fifield of The Athletic to discuss the game against Chelsea and Liverpool that is happening this Sunday. How are you, Dom?
Well, like everybody else, I'm COVIDed up to my eyeballs, but otherwise everything's fine.
Yeah,
Pining for life outside the bubble.
yeah. Well, hopefully you're doing okay. I'm hoping that Chelsea don't make you feel better with a win on Sunday. But apart from that, I hope you feel better. Just going into the game, really. Obviously, last time we had you on, it was not the beginning of the season, but it was relatively new. Since then, how has Chelsea's season been so far? Obviously, at the moment, 8 points behind City, and no games in hand, and you're 1 point ahead of Liverpool. Is it what Chelsea fans expected of this season?
Well, I should probably make clear from the outset that I'm not one of those Chelsea fans, so
Yeah,
I'm looking at this very independently. Um, I suspect that the start that Chelsea had to the season probably inflated expectations dramatically amongst supporters and also those that have been following the club as well within the media, and maybe we were guilty of believing that they were true challengers to Manchester City domestically, largely based on the effect that Tuchel had since coming to the club in January and the Champions League success, obviously last season. I think the month of December has really been a bit of a leveler for Chelsea. It needs a context. This is a club that has lost one game in all competitions since September. So on face of it, that's pretty good going, that there's a level of consistency there. However, 4 out of their last 5 home games in the Premier League, they've drawn. They've lost 9 points across December alone. And that's basically seen Manchester City come from behind and completely overtake them and sprint off into the middle distance, as I suspect they will do, for the foreseeable future. So the reality is that they'll go into Sunday's game a team that's badly wounded, a squad that is badly stretched, with Thomas Tuchel's mood pretty low. He's sort of raging against the world at the moment. The fact that he's had 7 cases of COVID within the squad, and they're sort of coming back in drips and drabs. The fact that he's had 4 or 5 players that have had major injuries or major muscle injuries that have kept them out for month, 2 months at a time, and they're maybe not fully fit. And I wonder whether deep down he also wonders whether he's managed this situation well enough, whether he's used the fringe players within that's what is still a very good and very deep squad well enough, whether he's used the talent that is still there at the academy, maybe to alleviate the load well enough on this group of players. Because at the moment, I was covering their game against Brighton off the telly on God, what day are we now? On Wednesday night, wasn't it?
yeah.
They just looked spent. They were running on fumes. They lost 2 more players to injury that night, which is great news for Liverpool. And quite honestly, predicting what lineup they put out on Sunday is anybody's guess at the moment. They look at a team that's on its knees.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching that game as well. The whole squad did look very leggy. I think Brighton definitely deserved a point at least,
Absolutely.
if not the win. But obviously, speaking about them injuries that you picked up, I think the main one is going to be James. It looks like he's out for the Liverpool game. Christensen as well, and obviously Werner's still injured. I think that's all your injuries, isn't it?
No, Thiago Silva, you can
Obviously,
check in there. Ben
obviously,
Chilwell is obviously out for the season now, and I'm not being funny to say that Ben Chilwell's injury has completely thrown that back line. That they don't have the same presence down that left flank anymore, and they've lost both their first choice wing backs now. Thiago Silva has been such a power of strength, operating in the middle of the back three, belying his age. We will get an update from Thomas Tuchel on Friday on that front, but he's got a hamstring problem, so I'd be very surprised if he featured on Sunday. Christensen's got a back injury. I mean, yeah, it's an opportunity for Liverpool looking at the resources that Chelsea have at the back.
Yeah, and obviously speaking of Thomas Tuchel, he said he was going on a bit of a rant. It was mainly over the Christian Pulisic injury where a dangled leg was ran into, should we say, and obviously Thomas Tuchel was very adamant that that was a penalty. Klopp as well has been very vocal about VAR and referee decisions in recent weeks, and it seemed at the beginning of the season that VAR had sort of balanced itself out a bit, but in recent weeks, there's a lot of controversy going on. I just want your opinion on it, especially from a Chelsea outlook. Do you think it's like VAR is failing in a sense? Obviously, it works in a lot of other leagues, but it just seems it's not going to plan in the Premier League, according to top managers anyway.
I found it very difficult to get worked up by VAR on Wednesday night, if I'm honest. There is an inconsistency there, definitely. There's an inconsistency visible in the couple of minutes around that incident where Pulisic goes down in the box and it's not considered to be a foul, and the VAR doesn't get involved. Will have looked at it, but doesn't try and intervene. And then Brighton break down the other end of the pitch, and I think it was Welbeck It may have been Solly Miles. It was somebody down the left flank for Brighton was tripped by a Chelsea defender, and the foul was given. And it was exactly the same situation, but because it wasn't in the box, it didn't generate the same amount of interest. So there is an inconsistency there that will infuriate them. But that's always been the case, whether there's been VAR or not. Tuchel's complaints on Wednesday night were sort of born of desperation, I think, to be honest. Yeah, there's an argument that Mason Mount didn't foul Veltman, I think it was, in the final minute and puts the ball into the empty net. It looked a bit soft, and Mike Dean made that decision, but because the on-pitch referee has made that decision and the VAR has looked at it and it's his opinion, it sticks with that. But that's officialdom. He argued that Dean shouldn't have blown his whistle before the ball got into the net, because if it had gone into the net, then they could have reviewed the goal. Semantics, really, to be honest. A lot of Klopp's complaints about various issues, and I've got a lot of time for Jurgen Klopp, and everything from his involvement in the vaccination issue, I admire him for that. I really do. But a lot of the complaints about on-field decisions at the moment, I think, are born of the fact that both Chelsea and Liverpool are looking up and they're seeing Manchester City sprint past them and away from them, and to be on a run that is threatening to replicate what they did last year, where they won every single match from the middle of December to the early stages of March in every competition. And they're doing that again. They won 10 Premier League games in a row, and it's threatening to suckle the optimism out of what we hoped was going to be a three-pronged assault on the Premier League title. Well, it isn't. It's a one-horse race again. It's threatening to become a one-horse race again. And I think that's probably prompting a bit of the exasperation that we're seeing from Klopp and from Tuchel. Given the AFCON's around the corner, they're losing players to injury and COVID, etc. It's just on top of them. I think they're lashing out, and VAR is an easy target.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of City, I mean, I completely agree. They do look like they're just going to go on a run where they just don't look like stopping. Do you think, obviously Chelsea now 8 points behind, Liverpool do have a game in hand, but, it's with the performances recently. Do you think that City are going to run away with the title, or is it too early?
Look, you can't say definitively, because even Manchester City could get hit with 10 COVID cases overnight that cost some players for 2 weeks, and crucial weeks. And well, that's 2 or 3 games, maybe 4 games that players could be ruled out for. And that would test even their resources. But the reality is they seem to be able to cope much better with this, or they seem to have been able to cope much better with this situation to date than most other contenders. They had 8 games in December. Chelsea had 9. the League Cup tie being the other one, when Chelsea picked pretty much a youth team anyway. And yet City have been able to maintain rhythm, form, finesse. They've rotated. They've got. It's almost been seamless. They can grind out results as they did against Brentford, and they can go and smash teams for 6 as they did Leicester City. They're just seasoned winners, and they're just doing what they did last year. And it would take something exceptional like a load of COVID or a load of injuries to actually, derail them, I suspect. For Chelsea, the next 2 games are crucial in the Premier League. The next 2 games are Liverpool at home and Manchester City away. After those 2 matches, we'll know whether Chelsea are still in the title race or not.
Yeah, I mean, obviously disappointing result, but going into this, as you've just said, then it's a massive game for both teams, really. They both need 3 points to keep in touch and distance of City. What are Chelsea's plans going to be going into the game? Obviously, it's the injury crisis at the moment. Liverpool are getting a fair few players back. Is there any real weakness that obviously you or, for instance, Chelsea will see, and that they can try and exploit?
The problem that Tuchel's got is he doesn't know he's got available. I mean, that's the reality of it. I think they turn up at Cobham every morning and they do their tests, and they just brace each time for a load more cases to crop up, or they'll be back at Cobham today doing warm down sessions with the players that played last night, and Reece James and Andreas Christensen presumably will be in the treatment room having scans on injuries that could well rule them out, most likely rule them out for Sunday. I think Tuchel said it himself. This is trial and error at the moment. Selection is trial and error. He doesn't know what he should expect from any of his players at present, the key players, because he's used a key core group of players throughout this season. Well, maybe he could have used more squad players. Maybe he could have given people like Ross Barkley and Saul Niguez more game time. But instead, he's stuck with the people that he trusts and the people that he believes have the quality and the caliber to sort of maintain this assault on 5 different trophies, which is what Chelsea are trying to do this season. And they're all exhausted. They're all knackered. They're spent. They've gone. So I suspect the next 2 days, Friday and Saturday, will be. He will just survey what he's got, and he'll try and come up with some kind of strategy. I don't think he's got the amount of time on the training ground to change the shape of his team, to stop playing 3 at the back, for example. I think he'll have to stick with the same system that he's been using really pretty much from day one since going to Chelsea a year ago. But then it just becomes a case of what type of team he can put out. The one player that looks fresh at the moment is Romelu Lukaku, and he will test Liverpool. I mean, that's a gimme. That will happen. But is he going to be able to get a tune out of Mason Mount, who looked shattered? Is he be able to get a tune out of Callum Hudson-Odoi, whose confidence looks utterly broken after the second half misplaced pass? Is N'Golo Kanté going to be able to start the game? Because he needs to, because quite frankly, Kovacic doesn't look up to it at the moment. He played 90 minutes against Brighton, 52 minutes before that, and he hasn't played previously for 2 and a bit months. Jorginho looks utterly exhausted at the other end of the spectrum. He virtually had to carry him off the pitch at the end against Brighton. I mean, but it is what it is. They've still got plenty. They had a load of internationals on the bench on Wednesday night, which most of whom didn't get off the bench. You just have to come up with a combination to hurt Liverpool as best you can. But if I was Liverpool, I'd be looking at this as a real opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of obviously the amount of injuries, COVIDs as well, Thiago Silva, Ben Chilwell, as you've mentioned, massive misses. I think Tuchel as well has said that Kante's being rushed back just purely because you need him. Where can Liverpool really get it, this Chelsea side? Is there a specific place on the pitch, or is it just everywhere?
Well, midfield is an issue for Chelsea, and Conte can. N'Golo Kanté can change that. So, he is a phenomenon still. And even when he's semi-fit, he seems to be able to run around for 90 minutes like a madman and do great things on a football pitch. So, you've got to assume that N'Golo Kanté starts the game, having come off for about 15, 20 minutes against Brighton. But where Chelsea will be vulnerable, weirdly, will be in an area where they were so strong earlier in the season, and that's their defence. This system that Tuchel plays relies entirely, really, on wing backs, on the inroads that they make. Chilwell and James have been fantastic. They've been the nearest thing any of the rest have to Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. Well, none of them are going to be available. None of them are going to be there by the look of things at the weekend. Chilwell certainly not, because he's out for the season. So if you take them out, you're then looking at Marcus Alonso, who is a weak link and can be targeted. And what's Azpilicueta possibly at right wing back, who doesn't have the same energy to go up and down that flank. But it may be that Azpilicueta has to play inside anyway, because no Thiago Silva, no Christensen. You know, that they're having to rely upon Antonio Rudiger, who is out of contract in 6 months. They may have to rely on Trevor Chalobah again, probably playing in the middle of the back three. He's a kid who was on loan at Lorient last season and has done really, really well. It's been the surprise package of that team. But, you know, it's a different ask when you're up against Salah, Mane, even a Mane is out of form, and Firmino or Jota to playing even against Brighton's players on Wednesday night. So that's going to be a real test for him. What other bodies do they have available at the back? I mean, are we back to Malang Sarr territory? Malang Sarr is not up to top level Premier League football. Unfortunately, hasn't demonstrated yet that he's ready for that experience. So there is vulnerability across an area where Chelsea previously had been so strong. So Liverpool will look at it and yeah, if they can get a foothold in midfield and feed their front line players, their forward line, then they can make real inroads in that Chelsea team.
Yeah, and finally, how we finish off every single opposition review or preview. Score predictions for the game on Sunday.
Look, I fear for Chelsea on this one. I think they'll be. I think that given that Brighton overran them, and Brighton played really good football, but they dominated